Yeah.
It's been a long time since we had a chat.
Very true, mate. Yeah, very true. But yeah, looking forward to it, mate. It's great to be back home. Yeah, I've had a couple of chats with you, but obviously with most people over here in this current world over Zoom and stuff. So great to be back in Oz and sitting down with people.
Yeah, tell us about this tournament that you're back to promote.
Yeah, obviously it's one of those. Yeah, I find it a little bit surreal because living here for the majority of my life and watching teams from overseas coming here and sort of for exhibition games or pre-season games and I never thought that one day I'd be coming back here with one of the biggest clubs and back to my hometown or my country anyway and so yeah, special for me I guess because of the connection, but I think it'll be a good game because again with these exhibition games sometimes, particularly most of them are running through pre-season and clubs are using it as a sort of warm-up. For ourselves and Everton who are coming over, we'll literally be playing in the Premier League or the Premiership on the weekend, getting on a plane and coming here. So the players will, be in good nick. So I reckon the games against Sydney and Everton will be good for us. So, and I think they'll be decent games.
And for the Australian side, you've been at Melbourne Victory. You played against Liverpool and others. How important is it, or what is the value for the local players and teams and coaches?
I think it is. I think it's tremendous value. I was Brisbane. I think we played Everton in a pre-season game, and I remember even if you speak to the players, I mean probably not as significant for me, but if you speak to the players at the time at Brisbane that I had, that was kind of the beginnings of the team that sort of went on and had success. And we'd had some pre-season games, as you do against local teams up in Brisbane, because it was hard. And our last game before the season started, we played Everton, and I think we lost 2-1 on the night, but played really well against a good side. And the players, when you talk to them now, they felt that was the first time they could see what I was telling them could come to fruition because they tested themselves against a really good team, and we played our football, kept the ball, all the things that were going to be challenging to us, and that gave them a lot of confidence. And I think it's important. I mean, again, with Victory, we played Liverpool at the G in front of 100,000 people, and there were some young guys in that team who've gone on to have decent careers who we had to put a young team out. I'm sure that experience just gave them the motivation and incentive to say, well, I want more of this. So I think there is value if you bring the right teams and it's done in the right way.
Let's go back over the last, what's been a phenomenal 12 months for you. When you first joined Celtic, how much did you know about the club? How much research do you do as a coach? How much do you want to know about the history? And
I knew everything about it, mate. I mean, and that was the bit that I guess not surprised people over there, but it was like, well, you're on the other side of the world, let's tell you about Celtic. And I'm going, mate, I played in a dressing room full of guys who grew up in Glasgow and different parts of Scotland, and they indoctrinated me all about Celtic. But I was obsessed with the game, so the great sides of football I knew all about anyway, and Celtic was one of those because of obviously Jock Stein and winning the European Cup, one of the first British club to do so. So there's a little bit of history there, a bit of romantic sort of the romantic side of the game. So I knew a hell of a lot about them, and I also knew about them in the current sense because, again, when I was national team boss, there's quite a few of our boys who were playing in Scotland at the time. Tommy was obviously at Celtic, but I think Jackson Irvine was playing there, Ryan McGowan was playing there, so I was following the Scottish League anyway. So, I've said it all along that while many saw me sort of having the bulk of my career on this side of the world as a disadvantage, for me it was an advantage because I had to work so much harder in terms of my knowledge. You know what it's like if you're passionate about football, you got to get up in the middle of the night to watch the games. That's a commitment, and like so many others here, did that. So I hit the ground running, mate. I knew exactly what I was taking on in terms of the club, history and current status, and also the competition that I was going to.
One of the most impressive things is the way you managed through the early times at Celtic. So, the fact is, as the first Australian coach at that level, you do have a trust deficit.
Yeah.
And you're aware of it. You're walking into a scenario where the fans aren't quite sure, the media aren't quite sure, and you have to somehow make that up. You have a couple of early losses in the Champions League qualification. You still got, you haven't built the team yet.
Yeah.
In that period is, well, how crucial is that period, and what's your thinking about getting through it?
Yeah, very crucial, and it's a bit I love, mate, because it's also that bit where I think people underestimate you. And I always use that as a little bit of a weapon for myself. I think I'm saying to myself, okay, there's no one here that really going to give me any sort of credibility in terms of opposition, in terms of people I'm facing up against. As long as I get the people within the group to believe in what I'm going to do and get the club behind me, then I'll take advantage of the fact that oppositions and other teams and who I'm competing against will dismiss us as, or dismiss me as a little bit of a non-entity. So, but that early period is important, and I don't see it important for me. It's more about how important it is for other people to believe in me, particularly the ones I'm working with, and beyond the methodology and the ideology and everything else I want to do is they've got to believe in me as a person. Yeah. So you're walking into a room, what it's like in a dressing room, and when you're talking to a group of people, particularly athletes, you can lose them pretty quickly, and that's irrespective of what you bring in. I've sat with people who've got unbelievable resumes and experience, and you sit with them and you're fairly underwhelmed. You walk away, So I kind of knew that first impression was going to be important, and I really sort of was determined to show people that we're going to play football a certain way, and it's not going to take 5 years to do it. It's not a club where you can have a 3-year plan. It's a club that had won 9 in a row, went to its 10th season with the biggest of expectations, and walk away with not a trophy. I couldn't go another year without a trophy because, as you said, with that sort of trust deficit, I needed buy-in, and we needed to turn things around quickly, and we did that. I think firstly with our football, because the results weren't there, but they're an educated fan base. They could see something. What I was saying was the seeds were there. It wasn't like I was saying we're going to play this way, then they'd roll up to the ground and say so. That kind of helped me in the early bits.
And the first forays into European Cup competition and the qualifiers, and then the Europa League, what was it like?
It was madness, mate. It was crazy. Even to today, I try and explain to people, and it's kind of a constant, I guess, for clubs who try and qualify that way in Europe. Your most important games are kind of before your season starts, and before you can get really your recruiting going, because a lot of them wait and see, well, if we qualify, then we'll do our transfer business. So you're really going in with a team that's not ready for that competition, and particularly for me, because I was coming in when a lot of the players, that team had sort of broken up. I was losing a lot of players, and Champions League, particularly the qualification for that, tremendous rewards on the end of it, and they were literally my first 2 games in charge. So, and being me, I just wanted to win. I wanted to get through. And I knew that we weren't anywhere near ready to do that. So, we performed okay, and then at least we knew then we had a couple of games to qualify for the Europa League, and I was determined to do that. And we had a couple of tough games against AZ Alkmaar, who were a good side last year, and we weren't again anywhere near the level we wanted to be, but we got through. And then the Europa was brilliant. I loved it. We got beat 4-0 by Leverkusen first game at Celtic Park. That was kind of my first big experience, and it was the crowd was unbelievable. The atmosphere was great. We lost 4-0 against an unbelievable team, but we showed enough again on the night where I was really encouraged, and I think the fans were. But you've lost 4-0, and for the most part, that's what people will look at. But we grew from that as a team. We ended up winning 3 of our 6 games, which I thought for the stage the team was at was a decent return for us. We got through to the next round. We lost to Bodo Glimt, but again at a time where I really was concentrating on winning the league, because in football timing's everything. I thought winning the league last year was the first time in sort of a number of years that you get direct qualification to the Champions League. What a prize. So we kind of prioritised that, or I did, towards the back end of the year. But I really enjoy the European experience, because the league, for all intents and purposes, like most leagues, you kind of face similar type of oppositions, don't really get challenged tactically. Europe's totally different. You're playing different countries, different styles, different managers with different backgrounds. It's brilliant.
In some ways, taking Celtic into Europe, particularly Champions League competition, is a bit like Australia against the rest of the world, in terms of going up against the richest, going up against the most successful, the biggest budgets, the best players in the world. How do you bridge that gap?
My view on that is you can do one or two things. You can sort of say, well, that's a gap that will never be bridged, because ultimately the rich clubs will continue to get bigger, and as we've seen, they inevitably now, as the riches are greater in these competitions, they focus more on them, so they're the ones that are beneficiaries of it. So that gap becomes bigger. Or you can take the view, as I have, that you chip away at it, mate. Every year you go there and you make a little bit of more of an impact. The more you're at that level, I think the more belief you gain as a club, as a group, when you're competing on that consistent levels.
So many up there in green and white, and it's surely going to go in. And Celtic's flying start is rewarded with an early goal. So
if you look at an Ajax now, and people say, well, Ajax, they've sold so many players in recent times. They're consistently making Champions League. They made a semi-final, but there's probably a 3 or 4 year period when they were building that team where they didn't even win the Dutch League, but they had the discipline to say, well, we're going to play young players. Probably won't win the Dutch League, but over the course of time, and say you look at a club like that and they're chipping away at it. They'll never be, and that's where I see a club like Celtic. I think you go into the competition, yes, for experience, but also to make an impact, and you chip away at these bigger clubs so that every time you're in it, you get a little bit closer. Will you ever get to the same space? Probably not, but enough where you're more than competitive, and I've had the same feeling about the Socceroos, mate, and I think for us qualifying for World Cups is great, but every time we go there, we should be getting a little bit stronger, feeling a bit better for ourselves,
I agree 100%. What about the fans? So how important is it to convince the fans that is the right path? Aside from the board and your management and so on, but to keep them on side, and are Celtic fans kind of, do they take to that?
I think so. I think with fans in general, but certainly Celtic fans, the way I found it is that as long as they can see what you're talking about, then, like I said, they're educated. They've seen a lot of football. They know the difference between, what I'm saying and what they're seeing. So if they can see that, I think there is buy-in there. I think, they want their club to, it's one of the few clubs that have won a European Cup, so they want their club competing at that level. They understand the differences that exist from a resource perspective, but they want their club to play in these competitions and to play the game the way that they want to see their team there play, irrespective of the opponent. Now, I think since 2000, Celtic's been out of the group stages of Champions League 3 times. So they haven't done it consistently. And a lot of times it's been on the back of performances where they've got unbelievable results, some big scalps, but typically defensive style. Where you take opportunities. Just nothing wrong with that, but. I'm trying to take this different approach, and I think it does resonate with fans. Ultimately, you still got to deliver with results. There's no getting away from it. But as I keep telling people, the reason that I get my teams to play this way is because I've had a lot of success, and I continue to have success with it, not because I like teams to play this way.
Well, this stadium is a special place on big European nights, and we've got one of them right here on the opening match day. Celtic back on the biggest of European stages for the first time in 5 years against record-breaking Real Madrid.
Your first game, Celtic Park against Real Madrid. What's it feel like?
Crazy, mate. I mean, you're standing out there, the Champions League anthem's happening, and supporters are going nuts. The noise was ridiculous. The Real Madrid white strips there, and Ancelotti's in the other. And I'm in charge of Celtic, obviously, and the whole thing's just surreal, because I know if I wasn't in that place at that moment, I'd be at home watching you guys, getting up early with my mates and watching it, and all of a sudden you're smack bang in the middle of it. And again, I'm there to do a job, and you're totally focused, but probably because of my age now, 57, I take a moment to appreciate it as well, because it's been a long journey to get there, and I want more of it. It motivates you again to be at that stage, but it was pretty special for sure.
Tony Kroos has seen a lot of football, including World Cups and finals in every competition, World Cup finals, and he said he'd never seen anything like the atmosphere. He thought the stadium was on full.
It was the noise level, and they sang through the whole game. And like I said, they're a real sort of passionate football fans. Obviously, they're totally one-eyed about Celtic and their club, but they know football. I mean, you know, Luka Modric comes off, and it was unbelievable tonight. They're still applauding him coming off. We've lost 3-0, and they're giving us, you know, standing ovation after the game because they saw a good football match. They appreciated that. And it's been a constant, like people say to me, even when I got the job, you know, a lot of people reached out to me who have been involved with the football club or, you know, at the top levels of football, and they said, look, Celtic on European nights is special. No matter what you've experienced, you will never get another experience like that. And, you know, being there that night, I understood what they meant, you know.
Suddenly venture forward, and it's a dangerous ball, and it's the opening goal of the match. Vinicius Junior scores Real Madrid's first goal.
So they literally had about 9 players within 20 metres of the ball, so we couldn't match numbers, and they were just keeping it. And they're good enough to do that.
Yes, exactly.
And then once they hit us on the break that time, they sort of broke through once. We kind of lost a little bit of belief, and then again, they were really good at just drawing us deep, having people deep and releasing from there rather than sort of building up with little numbers. They were prepared to have 9 players within sort of 30 metres of their goal for a build-up and leave, like I said, Vinicius because he's got speed up front and maybe Valverde and then go from there, which that surprised me a little bit because I thought they'd be a bit more expansive, but they were prepared to, and they did it really well. You know, Modric, Cruz, they were picking little areas where they could go. And like I said, the only way we could have stopped them was to match the numbers, which would have meant leaving. Would have left us. Vinicius one out.
So that's what he wanted, you think?
Which is what he wanted,
okay.
There goes the final whistle. Respect between the two managers. Ange Postecoglou's side really took it to Ancelotti's European champions, particularly in that first half.
Talk to us about, particularly for young coaches watching in the country, for whom you are a huge inspiration. What about the week in the lead up? How does that preparation come to life?
It's just all encompassing, mate, and that's the difference. And again, I think being here in Australia and particularly my sort of early days as a coach here, you've got to be very resourceful. You've got to pretty much do everything. When I started South Melbourne, I was literally doing everything, and then even when I sort of took over at Brisbane and you talk about your recruiting and transfers, and you've got salary caps and you've got foreign quotas, and you've got to be really creative about the kind of players and then the way you train and with the facilities we had. So, you know, fortunately for me, with the success I've had, every club and every level I've gone to, it's given me more resources and more ability to do things in a better way and find better ways of delivering my message. So, you know, now I'm at a club where obviously it's a massive club, well-resourced, great staff. I've got everything I need, and then the role becomes really, like I said, all-encompassing, where you're managing staff, you're managing, obviously the players, you're managing the environment. You've got the media and our supporters, the communication. So when you've got to lead up to a big game in particular, it's about how you use your time and your resources. And the other thing I've got really good at as I've got older is that I surround myself with really good people, you know, and give them an opportunity to be the best they can be by, you know, whilst I've got my hands over everything, and I'm still fairly old school in terms of, you know, it's my direction that we're following. I give people the autonomy and hopefully the confidence that, you know, that's your area, you do it your way, you know, you be the best you can be, and you need that as you get into sort of the big environments. But I think, you know, for young coaches, as you're going through, the more you can get your hands on dirty on every aspect of the game, you know, eventually if you move up the ranks and you get the opportunity to have all these great resources, you get to understand what it should look like from your perspective, you know.
And you see, of course, other coaches, Joe Montemuro over with Juventus Women, and we spoke recently to Paolo Ocon, at Club Bruges doing well, and of course you're, former captain and great friend way back from South Melbourne, Muskie's doing well. Talk to us about this period for Australian coaches just starting to move abroad. How important is it? What's it doing for Australian football? How's perception changing?
Yeah, it's. I don't want to sound too sort of cynical about things, but the one area I'm bullish about in terms of Australian football is the coaching space. You know, I think a lot of the ones coming through, obviously, were part of really the more successful periods in Australian football, and now they're moving and transitioning, and you're seeing the fruits of that because they're all really good, passionate football people that are determined to have careers now, in terms of the management of that side of things. And from my perspective, it's great to see them beginning to open some doors. I've tried to do that wherever I've been. I mean, as you said, Muskie, and Pete Klimovsky's doing well in Japan. I'm trying to, stay in contact with Driller in Europe. I bought H in, obviously, at Celtic. So, I think it's important. Sort of my role now is that the one thing I can sort of provide more than anything else, knowledge or experience, is opportunity. Particularly if I continue to have success, I think then people will start to maybe look at things a little bit differently from this side of the world. But it's still a major impediment, mate, to be honest. Up until I got the Celtic job, and that took some pretty amazing aligning of stars for me to get that opportunity. It was still, when I was over there at different times, there were still blank faces when they were looking at me. I had no idea who I was, what I'd done, and this is, after sort of the Socceroos, even after Japan, geography in our passport still is a heavy burden for us to carry. You got your pro licence challenges, where again, we're not recognised on that side of the world, so it's not an easy one, but I think the more sort of, myself and obviously, as you said, Joe or Paolo gets an opportunity. I'm hoping H now will open the door for him. Guys like Driller, the more they sort of carve a career for themselves. I'm hoping Muskie and these guys that more opportunities open up.
And from my perspective, Australian football has taken step by step by step, and then the players went to Europe, and then they come back to have an influence here at all levels and have a voice and so on. This is the first time that we have Australian coaches at the top level in Europe. Buying and selling the best players in the world, seeing what the level is, seeing what the technical level is, coaching against Ancelotti and the like. What do you think the influence of that is going to be back on Australian football here?
It just depends on the landscape, because going back to your question, we had such a great generation of players, and yet when you talk to them, most of them were pretty deflated when they came back to the country. They weren't embraced in the manner you just said. And a lot of them have chosen now to still live overseas. So if we're going to treat sort of the coaches the same way, if we're not embracing and accepting that, okay, these guys have got something to offer, and instead of questioning them or thinking that we know better over here, is to embrace that, then it'll work. But it just depends on the game here. Like I said, I talk to so many of our greatest footballers now live overseas permanently, and part of their disenchantment, I know, was that when they even dipped their toe back in Australia, it wasn't as a welcoming place in a football perspective. I'm talking about, not a lifestyle, as it probably should have been, and it's why we've missed an opportunity there. And you'd like to think that by the time I'm probably first cab off the rank, I'm the oldest, that by the time I'm done, that hopefully there's a different scenario and people are more receptive, but there's no guarantee of that.
It is a full house here in Warsaw this evening, despite the fact that Shakhtar aren't playing at their home stadium.
Let's go to the first away game you played against Shakhtar. What's the difference? What are you seeing in the different styles of football? And how are you preparing across multiple competitions now to play against the very best?
Yeah, that's the most challenging, but the most sort of invigorating bit, because you're right. You're playing against definitely different styles. Shakhtar was a bit of a unique experience too, because we played in Poland. Obviously, they can't play in the Ukraine, but you just knew that you got to think about this group of players. Displaced from their country, they've probably got relatives and people very close to them fighting a war, and they're sort of the flag bearers outside of what's going on in their country. There's a tremendous spirit in that group. I had enormous respect for that team and their manager, and they got some good footballers, and totally different to Real Madrid. They were going to play on the counter-attack. We kind of knew that. They had some real threats up front, and we paid a price when they caught us that one time. But at the same time, I thought we acquitted ourselves well, because every game, every team at that level is a formidable opponent, irrespective of what sort of nation they come from. I mean, we're in pot 4. There's a reason we're in pot 4, you know, and Shakhtar have been a consistent performer at Champions League level for a number of years. So good challenge. We've got Leipzig away first, then home back to back in between league games. So as soon as we get back, so again, they've just had a change of manager. Marcos Rose is coming in, great manager. They've got a great side, some quality players going through a transition. Again, really athletic, sort of dynamic team who can play in the counter-attack, can hurt you with the ball. So brilliant challenges. And I've got a really great young group of players. I mean, our sort of age demographic is still sort of, you know, below 24, which is very young, particularly at Champions League level. But I think they're going to learn enormously through this. And again, we'll take the game to them. You know, we'll try and play our football. And it's always, to me, it's how the football I want us to play, how it's affected by what the opposition are going to do. It's not about changing our approach. No. What are they going to do to try and stop us? What are the potential weaknesses in them that we can use through our game model to exploit that? So you're always well prepared, and the players are well versed in the strengths and weaknesses, but it's always around the notion that it's still, we're going to play this style of football, try and dominate in these kind of areas, and we're going to do that by addressing it in this way.
And so does that mean tactical or personnel adjustments, or just understanding what their threats are and where you're going to be able to hurt them?
A bit of both.
Okay.
You know, again, there's been some constants in sort of my career over the last sort of 25 years. Some things I really believe in, that I'm just unshakable in my belief. I like my team to have the ball. I want us to be aggressive in everything we do. I want us to play in the opposition half. I don't want us to be passive at any stage. So they're all the fundamentals. But within that, you find that as you go along and you get challenged by, you know, unbelievable teams with great qualities, their own sort of way of playing, that you need adjustments. And the way I've sort of done it in the way, you know, I've set up the game model now, and it's evolved, is that, you know, if you look at our team, I've got, say, 4 to 5 wingers, and they're all wingers. They all play wingers, but they've all got different qualities. You know, some have speed, some are better on the dribble, others are just great at getting on the end of things. So depending on who we play, it's then about the team selection. You know, same with the midfield sort of dynamics. You know, do I need 2 more dynamic players? Do I need 2 10s? Do I need an 8 and a 10? I've sort of tried to build teams that, you know, we'll play our 4-3-3, but that can look so different depending on the 11 I put out there, and that way we don't have to change too many fundamentals in terms of our approach, but having those players will mean that we change, it tweaks us just naturally, you know.
And so in the Champions League, is there, obviously there's multiple areas, but is there one area that you identified last year that you need to really be a bit more careful about and to pay attention to, whether it's the fast transitions of opponents, or? Yeah,
that was quite evident for us. We were, you know, whilst in the Premiership, we were probably getting away with it a little bit. You know, mistakes in our structure or mistakes in our build-up, we would get punished. You know, you kind of need to understand that at that level, obviously the margin of error is a lot smaller. Some of that is just experience. You know, players, as much as, you know, us coaches, we'd love to give information, until you actually live and breathe it, it's very hard to understand. So it's easy for me to say, look, boys, you know, we want to be aggressive in the build-up, but yeah, just be aware, if we give the ball away here, if our positioning is on, they're going to hurt us, you know. And on a weekly basis in the league, that might happen a couple of times. We don't pay a price, but I'm still giving them that, you know, when we play the good teams, and then you play a Leverkusen, and they've got some unbelievable players, and the first mistake we make, they've hit us in transition and scored. You know, we've dominated the game for 15 minutes, and then all of a sudden the players go, okay, we know what you're talking about now. So, and then it's up to me to give them the tools to say, well, okay, how can we, you know, diminish that threat? And that is, well, just a little bit of an adjustment in our position, where we're playing passes, you know, what times we're doing it. So, some of it is experience, and some of it is just, you know, sort of understanding, again, the game model, what we need to adjust on it.
Just get it into your head. You never stop. You never stop. We stop at half time, and we'll stop at the end of the game when we celebrate. But during the game, we don't stop.
Yeah, I noticed last year was great, you know, the movement of your fullbacks, and they were coming inside even in the early build-up and so on. And I just wondered whether this year in the Champions League, you know, you're just adapting a little bit to make sure that, you know, you're not allowing those transition opportunities.
Yeah, no, mate, I'm doubling down. I'm going the other way. I just feel like there's, part of me is always that if I'm going to make the ground up as a manager, like I'm 57, I don't have another 20 years of this, and for a club, for us, we've got to be a little bit different to everyone else. We can't, if we stand up with a traditional model that every other club does to negate these threats, we're going to be with the rest, and we're not going to make up the ground. So we've got to be a little bit radical, which, I don't mind that. I'm not risk averse. I love going all in on these things. So it's about then, okay, if we can get even more aggressive in what we do, maybe we can limit those opportunities even further, or limit where they get these opportunities. Particularly if you want to play this way, is if you give players some security, invariably in tough times, that's what they're going to fall back on. And I think then you become sort of that traditional model. Right. So, we've changed a little bit from last year. We've learnt from a couple of things, but our positioning will be just as aggressive. If that, try and be more aggressive, because again, if you play these teams, my feeling has always been your best chance of success is to make them uncomfortable. And if you give them what they see every week, if you retreat and sort of give them that space to play, they're not going to be uncomfortable. So, I mean, when we played sort of Real, I thought, for an hour anyway, we made them uncomfortable because they saw a team that was trying to keep the ball as much as they were, was being really aggressive on the press, which they're not used to. They're kind of teams just back off. Yep. Yeah. After an hour, they adjusted. They got quality, and they found a way to get through us. But like I said, we'll chip away, and hopefully next time that 60 minutes becomes 70 or 80 minutes, and eventually we crack it.
Well, recently we saw, a to and fro, and I think a bit of pushing or something between Thomas Tuchel and Antonio Conte. And as much as it was funny, it also was a demonstration of the pressure that people are under, human beings are under at that level, and the level of competition pushing them to zones that they'd probably rather not go. Just talk to us about that level of pressure there when you're going after, before and after a Champions League game. You got 100 media there. Yeah. You have a bad result. You've got to be fronting up and speaking. Yeah.
I don't think it's human beings at that level. I just human beings these days, mate. Life's changed, and when I first started coaching in South Melbourne, or even when we were playing, if we had a bad game, you could wait till sort of Monday's papers before you could hide for 24 hours and digest it all, and then the heat's coming. But now, particularly with social media and so many platforms, a verdict's been given before the final whistle, So, if you're under pressure as a manager, if you've lost that game, you're under pressure before that final whistle, by the time that final whistle's gone, people have cast judgment already. Things have, and people respond to that, unfortunately, people in power. So this notion of, building things, having a greater sort of ambition than just winning a game of football is a lot harder to sustain, because there's less patience. People want things straight away, and if they're not getting in the change, the likes of a Sir Alex Ferguson or an Arsene Wenger now building a side without any meaningful success in that early period. Even with that, are long gone. You look at, say, Jurgen Klopp now, after everything he's done, and all of a sudden people are questioning. Pep went through a tough time, and and you're going, are you serious? Like, these guys are the best, probably, in football chronology, will end up being some of the best managers, but yet people will still say, no, he's finished, he's done, And so there is a lot more, and again, I've taken, maybe because of my journey and where sort of I've come from, I'm just not buying into it. I'm still just going to do things my way. Like I said, I'm 57 now, so maybe I've got another 10 years of it, and I'm not going to fall into that trap of sort of, just trying to do things because I'm afraid of what the repercussions may be if we fail. It's just, we'll go for it. Take that sort of Aussie upbringing I've had of just going for something and not worrying about it. But it definitely is permeating and affecting the, elite sport, where we're seeing less and less of the builders, the romantics, the guys who want to do the special things, and more about, let's just get the job done. That's what's more important now. But the other beauty of it, living in Europe, mate, is that literally every night, we could put the kids to bed about 7, 8 o'clock, and I'll put my feet up and there'll be some game on. And that's, for me, that's brilliant.
It's heaven, yeah. It's football heaven.
Yeah, it is, because whether it's Champions League, it's La Liga, it's the Premier League, it's the Bundesliga. It's all on there, and it's at 8 o'clock at night. So that's how I finish my day.
Can you watch it without analysing?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay.
I just love watching it. Yeah.
And finally, Ange, just talk to us about life as the Celtic manager. Life at the top level of world football.
And look, Celtic's a bit of a unique case because it's one of the most famous football clubs in the world, but it's literally in a goldfish bowl. You know, there is nowhere in Glasgow I can go without sort of, somebody coming up to me. It's totally different existence. Even when I was Socceroos manager, I could sort of walk around the streets of Sydney without too many people sort of coming up. I literally can't get outside my front door without somebody recognising me, and obviously that affects the family. Look, we've embraced that and we haven't sort of hidden away from it. People have been kind so far. It helps that you're successful, and people said to me, when you get the job, the Celtic or Rangers manager, half of Glasgow loves you, the other half hates you. And my response was, that's only if you're successful. If you're not,
everyone hates you.
Yeah, so you've got to get success for 50%. If you're getting 50%, you're doing all right. And so it's all encompassing. Like I said before, it's the central focus for so many people's lives there. They're not. I've been trying to sort of explain since I've been here. They're not fans. They're not supporters. This is who they are. This is their family. This is the extension of them. So when they come to the game, they're invested. It's not, we're just going to support our team. So that's reflected in society there. And me being sort of the figurehead of the football club, there's enormous responsibility there, and it is a unique existence. I mean, I talk, even Brendan Rodgers says, when he was Celtic manager, he felt more scrutiny there than, even at sort of less than now where he's at the Premier League, because of just the nature of that football club. So, but, for me, I love it, mate, because it's what I've craved, and that's what maybe people don't understand over there. And I can understand why if you've had it maybe all your life. People just sort of shy away from it, but I've embraced it. The family have, because when I was here, that was my frustration. It doesn't matter what I did or what achievements I had, the recognition was never there that I felt, not just for myself, but for our game, deserved. That other coaches from other codes were getting elevated, and that was never going to happen here. And I was frustrated by that. So now being in a space, I'm taking it all in and loving it.
It's been thrilling to see you stand on the sideline against Carlo Ancelotti, and we're so looking forward to the Leipzig games. Well done on all of your work, but your work with Celtic in the last 12 months, so it's been absolutely phenomenal. Brilliant. Well done. It's good to see you home, and thanks for your time.
Good man. Thanks, mate. Awesome, because that was the first test. Yeah. So they've walked in and I've actually said, mate, couldn't be prouder. We're going to get better, but they're going, okay, all right, we know what this is.